Sens Hour, hosted by Shane and Derek, part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Sens Hour podcast. It's Shane alongside Derek, as always, part of the Hockey Podcast Network and sponsored by Customized Sports, your one-stop shop for all your custom jersey needs. Head on over to customizedsports.com and use promo code SensHour to get 10% off your order today. And today's a big day. We got new jersey numbers announced somewhat. We got training camp on the horizon. We also got World Juniors. We'll start with the World Juniors because it's a big day for Sens fans, as Timmy Stützle and a full Germany team are expected to play 5:30 or 6 o'clock versus Switzerland. And the winner of that game, if Switzerland can win in regulation, they'll be moving on to the quarterfinals. So this is a big day for Sens fans, as Timmy Stützle will be able to join Ottawa early if they were to lose.
Yeah, I don't know. There's two ways to look at this, I guess. For Sens fans, it's kind of a positive to see Timmy in camp with Ottawa. So if they lose, Tim Stützle will head over to Sens camp, and we got our first kind of look at the invitees on that camp list. So we'll get into that later, I'm sure. But there is two kind of positive ways to look at it. So if they lose, they head over. Timmy heads over to Sens camp, and if they win, then they'll have more games to play. And we'll get to see Tim Stützle dominate more games at the World Juniors, which, he's definitely done so far. So either way, I don't know that I've ever been more excited to watch one singular player. Like generally when I watch games, it's to watch teams play, with the exception of McDavid, maybe Nathan MacKinnon. You stay up late to watch a Colorado game. But to me, Tim Stützle provides the same kind of excitement just to watch him play individually, at least at the World Junior level.
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of one of those bittersweet moments because you want to see Timmy have success with Germany and whatnot, but you also want him in camp practicing and playing with the guys. And I think you kind of have to look at the pros and cons of both, really. But it's going to be an interesting game, and hopefully, whatever happens. But I think most Sens fans are okay with Germany losing.
I know I am. I've been kind of riding the whole send them home bus the whole time. But I will say that it's been extremely exciting. I'm off right now on holidays, so it definitely gives you something to look forward to when you can't really leave your house right now in a lockdown. I know we're getting like one hell of a snowstorm out here, so you don't really want to leave anyway. But you get to watch Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson, all our guys that are at the World Juniors right now dominate that tournament. And it's been a lot of fun watching Timmy.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it seems like Jake Sanderson got some unnecessary praise yesterday with a Zegras goal. Thurn was the one who got it, number 3. I know it can be kind of confusing with the way the numbers are on the back of jerseys and the angle. But Thurn was the one who got the assist. Sanderson was on the bench for that goal. But overall, I've been impressed with our prospects. It's been unfortunate that Clevin hasn't been able to be a mainstay in the U.S. lineup. But honestly, I think outside of Yarventi, who's been kind of a disappointment, overall it's been a good tournament for our boys.
Yeah, I think certainly the two members that are probably considered core members of the team moving forward, in Sanderson and Stützle, they've both been really, really impressive. And although it wasn't Sanderson that delivered that pass, I think Craig Button had everyone fooled, including himself.
Wouldn't be a Sens Hour episode without a little bit of a technical difficulty. Derek, you kind of cut out on there. What were you saying about Sanderson and Stützle being the core members? All right. Give us one moment as we kind of figure out the technical difficulties on it. We'll be right back.
When he said it.
All right, I think we got everything figured out. Sorry about the technical difficulties. It wouldn't be a Sens Hour live show without it. But yes, what were you saying about Sanderson and Stützle, how being core members and performing?
Yeah, I was going on about, at least we were talking about Järventie really hasn't had a huge impact on his team thus far in the tournament. But at least we could ride home with the fact that Sanderson and Stützle, who are going to be core members of this team moving forward, they've been outstanding at this tournament. Particularly Tim Stützle. I would say Sanderson's had overall an amazing tournament as well. I think he's turned a lot of doubters into believers, especially when it comes to the offensive side of what Sanderson can bring. But Tim Stützle he's stood out as probably one of the best players in the entire tournament. I think we could probably all agree that Trevor Zegras gets the crown for that. He is a year older, but he's looked absolutely outstanding. Looks like an NHL player at this tournament. But I would say really close second, Tim Stützle has been outstanding. It is hard to say really because he's playing on a German squad and he's going to stand out more than his teammates. But just to the degree that he stands out, and it's not just every game, it's every shift. So, I mean, we're watching Stützle dominate every shift, and some of his shifts are almost 2 minutes long, and this kid is still going. Like, his endurance is like Thomas Chabot level good. It's crazy for a kid coming off an injury.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit different because his injury was, arm related, so he didn't lose any he was able to, still work out on his legs and whatnot. But I understand. The player that has impressed me the most outside of, Zegras and some of the guys on Team Canada, freaking Elias for Germany. 18-year-old born about a month or 2 weeks before Byfield. He put up 89 points as an under 16-year-old a couple of years ago. He put up 49 points last year in the under 20 league for Germany. Dude didn't get drafted. Probably will get drafted this year. But again, late, almost a 2021 pick anyways. He plays center. He has great chemistry with Peterka and Stützle, and Ottawa loves their chemistry. So I know it's early, but the draft is only a couple months away now. He's someone I think Ottawa is going to be targeting come draft in July or August.
He has looked really good. I've liked what he's did with Stützle. He kind of finds that bumper spot, much like we'll see Dadonov do all season. But he likes to hang out in the quiet areas, I call them, of the ice in the offensive zone. He finds a spot kind of in that high slot area. And Stützle has been able to find him. I've noticed a few times. It's been really close to going in. But aside from that, yeah, his overall game is good. He's won a lot of faceoffs too, some clean faceoffs. One almost resulted in a Stützle goal. It hit the crossbar just before they went to overtime last game. I've liked him. I've been impressed with Dubé as well on the German squad. They're an undermanned squad, and finally they're going to have their players back, so it should be fun to see. And I think Bugle, if I'm saying it right, the goaltender for Germany, at least was able to make some saves last game and keep them in it. I thought his 5-hole was questionable, but aside from that, he was at least able to make the saves that you expect him to make. So to me, I'm optimistic about a W for Germany today, especially getting their players back. I thought they controlled the game last game. For much of the game, they had a lot of puck possession, and they were still undermanned. So it's important to note that they didn't trail off late in the game at all. They really took it to Slovakia and dominated the play.
Yeah, and that's for sure. And I think it's important to notice that with that loss, the Slovaks still have a chance for second if they're able to beat Finland this afternoon at 2:00, and Finland were to lose to Canada in regulation tomorrow. So there's still a lot to be decided, but I think the main one right now is, for Sens fans, going to be the Germany-Switzerland game at 6:00. But even looking after the game, the Russia-Sweden game, I think we can both say that Russia underperformed against Austria. 7-1 was not something I was expecting. I was expecting it to kind of be, 11, 12, 13 goals for Russia. But they still have a chance at, even with the loss to the Czech Republic, which I think everyone was surprised about, they have a chance to win first if they were to beat Sweden today. And if they win first, they're playing a team, either Switzerland or Germany, instead of either Finland or Slovakia, which I think gives them a better chance to the semifinals. So it's going to be interesting. Where do you think, if you're Sweden or if you're Russia, would you rather have the easier matchup in the quarterfinals or face on another team so you're kind of you get those good habits?
No, I would definitely rather play the easier team. I think this is such a short tournament. There's no room for error. I said this all along, I guess, about Canada being in such a weak group this year, having won the tournament last year. And, the tournament placement is based on the year previous. So that's why they get the placement that they did in their group. But at the same time, I would much rather, if I'm Russia, I would much rather play the lowly, German squad versus a really good team. I would definitely prefer that route to the semis if that were the option, rather than risking it and, playing a team that's really good and you never know what could happen. It's one game, anything could happen.
That's for sure. We saw with the Czechs beating the Russians. Looking at going over to the state side of things, they had a really good showing against the Czech Republic. I believe it was a 8-1, 7-1 final.
Yeah, I think it was 7-1. Yeah.
Which, this is the Czechs' second blowout loss. They lost to Sweden to open up the tournament. With USA's last game is against Sweden. Depending on what happens tonight, Sweden can lock up first in the division tomorrow with any kind of point. But if you're the US, or if you're looking at the US team, which team are they? Are they the team that lost to Russia 5-3, or are they the team that came out and they blew out Austria like 11-0, and they come out blow out the Czech Republic? Which team are they? And are we going to see them kind of go back to the Russia game, or are they going to explode and kind of throw Sweden around?
Yeah, I thought they were playing chess a little bit with the Russians. They were on their heels a lot of that game, and the Russians, I think, game planned so well against the States that it made them look a little bit slow, especially in the neutral zone. Like, they just didn't have that breakout speed that we've seen them have versus the other opponents during this tournament. So to me, it'll be an interesting thing to see. I personally, looking at you look at the players on the States, and this should be 1A if we're considering Canada number one. And I don't even know that you would. Like, I think the States and Canada have two of the strongest teams, and it's very, very close, especially with the loss of Kirby Dach. So I would expect to see the States, if they're in that position again, playing Russia again, they're going to change their game plan. I think we'll see a much stronger performance from the U.S. when they're playing against stronger opponents in this tournament. So I would go with the latter. I think they're the better team versus anyone in their group. But it's close, like it is in this tournament. The Finns always have a good team. Sweden's always going to give you a run, and they've had a lot of success at this tournament. And obviously, Canada is the powerhouse. And then there's the Russians that seem to get there, even though sometimes they don't have great performances before. Then they get to the medal rounds and they perform well. So the Russians are a wild card as well.
That's for sure. I mean, Sweden has, I think, 53 straight games won. dating back to like '05 or '06 in the round robin and only have one gold medal to show for it. So realistically, once you hit the medal round, anything can go. But the U.S. have their own version of Germany's Timmy Stützle and Trevor Zegras. He is most likely going to Anaheim camp after this tournament. He signed his contract. He's not going back to school. If you were to pick out of the 4 big guys who in the tournament right now, who I believe should be under contract, we have Zegras in Anaheim. We have Cousins there's a bunch of guys under contract for Canada, but I'm going to take Byfield and Cousins for Canada. And then we look over to Germany for Stützle. Which of the 4 you think has the biggest chance of making the biggest impact on their team coming from the World Juniors and taking their World Junior performance from here to camp?
I would love to pick Tim Stützle, but that would be the bias in me. I want to take Tim Stützle. I think he could make a run for Calder, but I think probably out of those players, the safe choice is Zegras. I wouldn't underestimate what Cousins could do either in Buffalo, but I'll take Trevor Zegras. I think he's the most complete player at this point in time, but again, he is a year older than Stützle. So Zegras, for me, especially on that Anaheim team, it's an aging Anaheim team. I think he could make a huge impact really, really quickly. Anaheim's going to be a good team in the future as well. They've got some prospects coming up that will make them a much better team. Jamie Drysdale's had an outstanding tournament as well. Really makes you watch him play and then you're like, man, he's really worked on some of the defensive flaws that he's had, while Sanderson's worked on some of the offensive incapabilities that people thought he had. So it really makes those two so comparable, really for their NHL ceilings. I think I like them both.
Yeah, that's great to it's nice hearing I know a lot of people are like, oh, Stützle, but I think Zegras has taken huge steps during his 10 months off, basically. He had 9 assists leading the World Juniors last year. He comes out and has a dominating performance to start the World Juniors and has continued it. He had 5 points the other night. He's just all over the place. Anaheim has a really good combo with him and Drysdale in their prospect pool, among other players who they have in the tournament. And here's a question. Bobby Orr Brink has had a great tournament. And then we have 2021 prospect Matthew Beniers, who has been really good for the U.S. squad. With how interesting this draft year is, I believe he's the only draft eligible player on any on Canada and the U.S. and Russia. I think everyone else has been drafted or have had their draft year passed. Where do you think? Do you think Beniers, with this tournament alone, has proven that he's a top, not 5 pick, but a top 3 pick and should be in conversation for the first overall pick with Owen Powers out of Michigan?
I don't know about first overall. I like what Beniers has done. First off, I'll say that he's been outstanding. He's looked really good. He's a confident kid. He doesn't look younger than anyone he's playing with. He's an undersized guy. He's not a big guy. But he's a skilled player. I think he plays with some tenacity that I really like too. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to. I don't think he's going to be in conversation for number 1. Although there is no real clear-cut number 1 this year. That's another thing we should note for the draft coming up. I think people favor Owen Powers, but is it Power or Powers? Power.
Owen Power. Yeah.
There's no S. Owen Power, he's huge. He's a massive defenseman, and he looks like an NHL defenseman already. He's just a very mature player. But we've seen players similar to Power, I'll say Aaron Ekblad, for example, who have kind of plateaued relatively early. And I think some teams may question that with an oversized guy like Power. So could a guy like Beniers, could Beniers enter the conversation for number 1? He could. He's definitely in the top 5. He's in my top 5. There's some other really good defensemen. Brant Clark out in, I believe, plays for the Barrie Colts. He's going to be up there. there's quite a few that look really good coming up for the draft, but very few forwards. So I don't think this class is going to be quite what it was last year. I'll say that.
That's for sure. I mean, it's interesting to note that Power is about 3 months younger than Byfield. Like he's past he's an 02 baby. He was born in November 02. So he technically he's the same age as Byfield and Drysdale and whatnot. And if Byram if there was a regular season as normal, there's a good chance that Bowen Byram isn't at the tournament right now, or Jamie Drysdale. And we see a guy like Power at the tournament and seeing what he can do in terms of being a high-level player at the international stage. And there's a bunch of players like that, really, who, if there was a regular year, they would have been on their respective teams for the U.S. and for Canada, respectfully. I'm interested to see what happens after the tournament with a guy like Sanderson going back to UND. They're going out of the pod. They struggled without, UND has struggled without him and Clevin, mostly Sanderson, really. It's going to be interesting to see how he continues. Does he pull a Pinto and just kind of continue on the way he was? Does he pull a Lassie Thompson and kind of regress a little bit after the tournament? He's a guy that I'm interested in seeing how he reacts and how he continues to develop after this tournament.
Yeah, I try to watch, as much as possible too for the World Juniors. And I've noticed Sanderson, he just looks really, really good. Like everything he does looks really clean, looks really good. He never seems to panic. He had a couple of moments where, you could criticize him, I guess, a couple of little brief moments in his own zone, but very few mistakes. And that's kind of the game that Sanderson plays. But he does add some offense, and I think that's the key thing that people forgot about Sanderson. So with Sanderson, I'm glad we took him. I said that before. I'm glad we took him at number 5. I'm really glad we got Tim Stützle at number 3, and that's nothing against Byfield, who had an outstanding performance last game with 6 points, really silencing a lot of the critics. Good job on Quinton Byfield. And Bowen Byram, a player who kind of has Senators connections in that he was involved in the trade, which Colorado drafted him 4th overall, and Ottawa opted to wait for Brady Tkachuk the following season at 4th overall. So to me, I would prefer Sanderson over Drysdale. I would prefer Sanderson over Byram. So I'm happy with who they picked.
Yeah. So before we continue, we're just going to flip those. Tkachuk was in 18, Byram in 19.
Yeah, they opted to take Tkachuk in the year that they were in when they finished. Yeah, and then they finished dead last in the league.
And still got 4th overall.
Of course, Colorado lost out on the draft lottery and ended up with Bowen Byram. So really good pick, by the way. Like, I don't mind Byram at all. He's just very offensive-minded and not so much defensive-minded whatsoever, but still a very good player.
Yeah, just before people, listen to the episode and they're like, that's not right, and they roast us on Twitter.
It sounded in my head, but it always does, and then it comes out wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I've been there. I think we've all been there and saying something and realizing, like, that's not right.
No.
But, the World Juniors has been a lot of fun to watch. I know there's been a lot of blowout games, and there's been discussions on how you can do it, how you can stop it. It is what it is. This is how teams get better, right? Like, every year it happens. There's one team that gets blown out. Latvia, it's happened to Latvia, and then Latvia comes in next year and kind of surprises somebody because they don't get relegated. Denmark's the same way. It's very hot and cold. It is what it is at the junior level. It is what it is in international play, to be honest. It's just there's some countries that don't put the program on a top tier like they should, and they get minimal training, minimal resources, and they come in against teams like Canada and US, who this is a huge resource, a lot of money goes into their programs. And it's disappointing to watch, but it is the game, and it matters. The goals matter at the end of the day.
Yeah, for me, I take it as it's an opportunity to watch your team's prospects as much as it's an opportunity to cheer for your country. Obviously, when you're watching a 10-0 blowout, you don't exactly follow the game as closely as you follow some of the medal round games and some of the more exciting kind of nail-biting finishes, but But it is, I always take it as an opportunity to watch some individual players that I'm excited to see. And the thing I look for the most when it comes to the World Juniors is players that have played in the World Juniors the year previous, just to see how much and how quickly some of them can develop in 1 year. And then they come into the tournament, players that barely were noticeable the year before, and then they come in and they start to dominate the tournament the following year. It's great to see that progression and just how quickly players can develop.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that kind of correlates into Byfield a lot because, people use the age as an excuse and whatnot, but he was part of last year's team. He was kind of sheltered in last year's team. People kind of wrote it off as like, okay, there's more experienced guys, bigger guys in front of you. And then there's Lafreniere, where he was compared to, like, if you're going to be a second overall pick behind this guy, how are you playing fourth line minutes and not producing at the same level? Because that's all how it is. First, second, third always get compared to each other. And he came into this tournament, and it was a lot of the same thing. Kind of invisible, wasn't really around the puck, seemed to kind of be scared to make plays or, show everyone, like, this is why I'm a second overall pick. And I didn't watch, to be fair, I fell asleep at within the first 5 minutes of the Canada game. And I woke up, it was like I went to bed after the first goal. I fell asleep after the first goal. Woke up, it was like 5-0 for Canada. And I'm like, cool. I fell back asleep and it was like 10-0 when I woke up. And I'm like, oh, it's one of those games. I heard Byfield had like 6 points, which is fantastic. But I want to see what he can do against Finland and then into the medal rounds before I claim that he's, silenced the critics. I don't think one game is a good, especially against Switzerland, is a good and fair
measuring
stick onto how he's developed and where he's going to go. So, tomorrow is against Finland. If he can even have, I don't even care about the points, really. I just want to notice him. Because the first 2 games, I didn't even know he was on the ice. I want to see him I just want to notice him making plays, driving plays. I don't care if he gets onto the scoreboard, honestly.
Yeah, it's very similar in that, it's not fair to criticize a player when, like for example, they're in on the 2 side of a 16-2 game when it was Germany versus Canada. We're not going to look at that game and say, oh, Dylan Cousins is going to be the best player in the NHL because he scored like 4 goals or whatever it was that game. It's the World Juniors, and that's what it is. It's a small, very small sample size where a lot of people make overestimations of players based on a really small sample size, and sometimes, depending on the player, they're not getting a role compared to some of their teammates. So it's really hard to take anything from a 10-0 game. It's hard to take anything when a player isn't performing well. If they're getting, Byfield was getting like 10 minutes a night or 11 minutes a night. So I think on either side, we need to reserve our judgment for seeing what Byfield could do at the NHL level. Same with Tim Stützle. I mean, we all want to get excited about what he's doing in the tournament, and it's easy to get excited about it. But at the same time, we're talking about a player who is leagues above anyone else he's playing with. He's just, the far superior player on his team. So could he have put up more points if he was with, Team Canada, someone that could finish? Maybe, but at the same time, he wouldn't be getting 31 minutes a night. So it really is, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt in the World Juniors. That's just the way it is.
100% agreeing. I mean, I know I've been critical of Byfield, and I like Byfield. I do. I think he can turn out to be a really solid player in the NHL. He just has his development curve is probably a lot wider than Stützle's or Lafreniere's. And that's why personally I would be a little bit more cautious on it, especially as a team like LA, who you're not saying you're rebuilding, but like you probably should be rebuilding. And it's just, for me, it's kind of especially since we have Logan Brown, I don't really want him to fall into the same trap. And, it's always that comparison. Lafreniere is in his league of his own. No one's really going to compare him anymore to anybody. But it's always going to come down to Byfield and Stützle, especially with the Kings and Ottawa. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next, 10, 15 years. But every time these two go against each other or in the same tournament internationally, they'll always be compared to each other.
what I'll say from the Lafreniere and Stützle comparable is that Lafreniere, when he first entered the tournament, was seen as kind of a soft, very shifty player with a lot of skill. And Stützle was the same way last year in the tournament. And then Lafreniere came in last year in the tournament, and everyone's seen how much physicality and size that he added, and also the shot that he added. And then now you're seeing the exact same trajectory with Tim Stützle. And that's what gets you so excited if you're a Sens fan. You're seeing Stützle is basically following the same path. He came in and you could see immediately what he added to his game. He didn't stay the same. He didn't plateau at all. He added physicality in a big way. He's winning. There was a few occasions last game where he won 1-on-4 puck battles, specifically on the PK. He was in the offensive zone. He was 1-on-4 and no one could touch him. They couldn't get the puck off him. And that's when I seen wow, this guy's really added strength. He's not falling off his skates. He's not falling on the ice like he was in the DEL. So I'll be interested to see what he could do at the NHL level with, really strong players.
100% agreed. And before we take a break, because when we come back from break, we're going to jump into Sens talk. Training campus is right around the corner. We have the roster of people there, obviously some omissions for now. But remember, guys, we have our YouTube channel. Definitely go subscribe to that. We'll have episodes there and small, side content being posted there starting in the new year as well. Follow us on Sens_hour on Twitter and Instagram. We just hit 600 followers on Twitter. Hopefully by the middle of the year of the hockey season, we can get close to 1,000. So that'd be fantastic. But we'll be right back, and on the other side of the break, we'll have Sens hockey. Sens Hour, hosted by Shane and Derek, part of the Hockey Podcast Network. All right, we are back. Thank you all for joining us. And first half hour was all World Juniors, different situations, different prospects. But we're getting into the Senators talk. Sens camp is opening up on Thursday, December 31st. They have their media day today, getting to see some of these players in the new threads. It is beautiful. Derek, you came out and released the fact that Josh Norris is going to be taking over the curse number 9. And for the ones who don't understand the curse number 9, Havlat kept getting hurt when he wore it. McCulloch kept getting hurt when he wore it. Ryan started getting hurt when he wore it. Hopefully, Norris can break that curse. But yeah, let's dive into it. You can break down the roster of who we have coming to camp.
Yeah, so it'll probably be easier just to mention the players that are notable absences from camp. So it is notable that Michael Haley is on IR. We don't know how long he's on IR for, but that's notable. And the absence is Rudy Balcers, not invited to camp for some reason, and Alex Warmington. So perhaps just the falling under the unfit to play thing. It's interesting, though. I think he was around teammates not too long ago. So they were playing some pond hockey, were they not?
Yeah, I think he's still battling an injury, though.
Yeah, so it could be. There you go.
Because I'm pretty sure he got hurt near the end of his time overseas. So I'm pretty sure he still might be dealing with it. But yeah, I'm looking at it. I'm surprised that he isn't one of the guys brought into camp, unless they know he's going to get a spot.
Yeah. Should also mention, while we're on the topic of jersey number changes, Marcus Hogberg is going to wear number 1 for Ottawa.
Damn.
So so he's changing his jersey as well.
Damn, I like that 35 on him. I'm very disappointed.
Yeah, it actually suited him. It looked really good. But yeah, I think with the new threads, a lot of people are deciding to change. I'm interested to see if Alex Formanton will come listed as number 10, the number that he kind of wore growing up, instead of 59 or whatever. I think it's his 59 is his number right now. So
yeah, Thompson is coming in wearing number 60, which is an interesting number. The one player on defense that I'm really interested in seeing is Jonathan Asperot. He's a 99
forgot about him.
He came in on, I believe, a PTO, made it in Belleville, signed a Belleville contract to remainder of the season, and then signed a 2-way deal with Ottawa this season. Dude is underrated. He's shown that he can play. I'm very interested to see what he can do. I don't think he's going to make the camp or make the team right now, but I definitely want to see where he's at in his development.
Absolutely. And if there was anyone wondering if Anisimov was not going to camp, he is listed on their camp roster. So that kind of ends that discussion. He will be there. I know when Ottawa went out and acquired, a bunch of players, everyone was kind of wondering who was moving out. And it may not be the case. They probably just want the depth there. We should also note that Cedric Paquette is going to don number 23, and Braden Coburn's going to stick with his number 55.
And it's also important to note Igor Sokolov will be at camp donning number 75. Now that's going to be nice to see.
That's my number right there. So, I mean, that's great. I think I mentioned before, that's the number that I always wore in hockey, and it's part of my Twitter handle. So, Sokolov, I'm stoked. I forget. I think we asked him on the show what number he was planning on wearing. I don't know if he picked 75.
He didn't. I don't think he did. We'll have to go back and listen to it. Important to note, Jonathan Davis has moved from 17 with the addition of Galchenyuk. He's gone to 49. Ridley Craig is apparently on the roster. He hasn't been given a number, and Michael Haley has been given 38. Kastelic is at 47. Parker at 45. And Megwood is at 78. 78, yeah, for Megwood.
Yeah. How do you feel about Eric Goodbranson donning the Pajot number at 44?
I don't care. It's just a number.
Yeah.
Like Pajot for the most part was a fourth line guy. Yeah, he won but he won the Hearts, but he's no, Mike Fisher, who really no one wore 12 until Gabrick showed up for a couple of games. He's no Chris Neil. He doesn't have that, and even Jason Spezza, when he left, no one really touched 19 until they traded for Brassard. They don't have that same level of
you can't retire every number. I mean, it's not feasible to retire every number, but it does. I mean, Pajot was he was a crucial player in the playoffs. I don't think we could take anything away from what he did, but certainly doesn't warrant a jersey retirement.
No, and I mean, realistically, we probably won't see anyone wear 65 or 61 for a little bit, and that's not because of Stone or Carlson. Really, it's just those were odd numbers to wear, even for those players. So we're not going to see it as often as someone wearing, 9 or even 44 is a little bit odd, but Goodbranson has worn it in the past. So it's not that out of the blue for him.
And one little note, Eric Goodbranson will get tried first with Thomas Chabot. So how are you feeling about that?
I think Eric Goodbranson is a lot better than the analytics show. And I think he'll give Chabot the confidence to go out and make a play in the offensive zone, and understanding that, Goodbranson will be back there to cover up if he gets caught deep without any issue.
For me, analytics, I mean, it's really tough, but lately I've been pretty critical of the analytics community, specifically, their kind of prejudgment of prospects. I think it's really, really hard to measure when you have prospects playing in many different leagues. And it's probably a lot more accurate when it gets to the NHL level and everyone could be kind of measured against their teammates. It's still kind of hard because every team is different as well, and they play with a different system and a different structure. So it really is, it's such a difficult tool to use in hockey because it's such a quick game. It's not, this isn't baseball where you could break down every pitch, and the game is kind of paused for long periods of time, and you could really overanalyze it. I think hockey is just a game where there's a lot of fluke involved. There's a lot of bounces involved. It happens so quickly that analytics are, to me, a little bit less usable in a sport like hockey.
Yeah, and I mean, analytics have their place, just like the eye test has their place. But my issue with analytics is that it doesn't take into account everyone else. It's very like, we've seen it before where, for example, there was a play a couple of years ago, CC passes it up to Hoffman. And he passes it up the board like you're supposed to. It's a proper breakout pass. And then Hoffman, for some dumb reason, decides to pass it across the ice through the neutral zone, and it gets picked off and it leads to a goal. And people were blaming CC for it because they weren't in position. Hoffman should have never made that pass. And it's things like that that don't get counted toward, like they ignore or aren't part of the numbers. And for me, it's just like, you can look at it like it's a useful tool, but there's a time and a place for it. And unfortunately, sometimes people ignore that just to prove their point.
And I think that's it. I think when a guy gets labeled for something, it's really hard to lose that label. And sometimes it's impossible. Like you mentioned, Cody Ceci, as soon as he was labeled as a lousy defender with low hockey IQ, people were dissecting every move he was making on the ice and making it seem like he didn't belong anywhere near the NHL. I mean, this stuff happens all the time. Just like when a player gets labeled as a really good player, people don't necessarily see some of the mistakes that they make. And I think we've seen that last game with Tim Stützle. Like, a lot of people were, following along, talking about how great he was. And there was a couple lapses in judgment. There was a couple lazier shifts, back checking that I noticed that I was like, well, we've got to acknowledge everything. And I'm not going to fault a kid who's having to play 32 minutes a night for a lazy back check here and there, especially when, he brings what he does to the table offensively. But that's just an example of, sometimes when we create these labels in our head, we only see things that way. And I think, like you said, people will label a player before, and then they'll go and build analytics after they've already labeled the player. So it's easy to, prove your point if you want to prove a point and say this player is lousy because he sucks at this, and this. And this player is great because he's great at everything and, can do no wrong. But every NHL player is going to make mistakes. Every junior player is going to make more mistakes. That's just part of the game, part of the growing process. And I think it's important, again, to take analytics, read analytics and use analytics, but not use them to make your full assessment of a player.
This is what I've been trying to say about Chabot for the last 2 years. Chabot's very good offensively. And this is the same thing with Karlsson. They weren't necessarily horrible defensively, but they had their struggles in their own zone. I don't know how many times I watched Chabot get muscled off the puck by one or two guys easily and turning it over. That generates a scoring chance for the opposing team and ending up getting scored on. There's two plays that come to mind where it's just really? You made that play. There was one against Detroit where he's in the corner, and instead of wrapping it around, he's holding onto the puck. He gets out muscled, and it leads to a scoring chance. There's another one against Vegas when they're in Ottawa. He passes it straight to Stevenson on a power play, and it leads to a Stevenson breakaway shorthanded goal. Sometimes I feel like he kind of thinks too much, and he tries forcing plays. And you can talk about all the good he's doing, but we need to acknowledge that these players, no matter how good they are going to make mistakes, and they're going to have weaknesses to their game. McDavid is horrible defensively. The analytics and the eye tests show that he's not the greatest defensively. He has his moments, but overall, you could probably bet on him having a blown coverage in his own zone at least once a game.
Yeah, I watch a ton of Connor McDavid, and I'll say Draisaitl's probably worse. Defensively, Draisaitl sometimes is a nightmare. He just doesn't even try sometimes defensively. He's they're both, you take the good with the bad with those players because they're both two of the very best players in the league offensively. And I think we're gonna see some of that with Tim Stützle, just much like you said with Chabot. These are players that take higher risk because they have the skill to do that. So the last thing you want to do is take that skill away either. You don't want them getting into the mindset of making the simple play every time, because then, nobody's really the straw that's stirring the drink offensively. And the Senators need a couple of those players that aren't afraid to take risks. But sometimes it's calculated. You've got to take calculated risks. You have to know when to take a risk. You can't be the last man back and try to, beat your guy 1-1 or hang on to the puck too long or make a pass through the neutral zone that's going to get picked off. So those are things that will have to be learned in time. When it comes to Shabbat, when it comes to Stützle, it's going to be, much of the same thing. He likes to carry the puck a lot. Sometimes he likes to carry the puck right from behind his own blue line, right from behind his own net. So you're going to see mistakes, much like, like you said, the very best in the game makes a lot of mistakes sometimes, Connor McDavid. So we'll see mistakes. It's hockey. That's part of the game. And don't take analytics too seriously, because the moment you do that, I think hockey becomes less fun. I mean, you're just looking at all these little plays and trying to dissect, every shot attempt on net, and you're making a judgment from a shot attempt from sometimes just dumping the puck in and it goes on net, and that's a positive Corsi stat. And it's like, really? That had no impact on the game, and you actually gave up possession. So what is that telling you?
Yeah, I mean, puck possession, and again, puck possession's great, but I much rather win the high danger chances than the puck possession chances, because I've seen, Toronto's very good at puck possession. What have they won with that? It doesn't matter how often you can control the puck if you can't finish.
Yeah, and then, perimeter play is just perimeter play. I mean, you're just tiring yourselves out as much as the other team. Yeah, and I don't care if you could possess the puck for 60% of the game, but if that other 40% of the game, the opposing team, when possessing the puck, have more chances and have better high danger chances, well, that's what I want. I want those chances. I don't want perimeter play or even just quick shots and whatnot. I want the high scoring chances, and there's numbers that need to reflect that, and there's people that don't do it. Yeah, I just think if you take the simplicity out of the game, you take some of the fun out of the game as well. I mean, you could ruin it for yourself. I've kind of, I went through a stage where I involved myself in, trying to learn everything there was to learn about hockey analytics. And it just kind of sucked some of the fun away from it. It was like, Seth Jones, for example, he's one of my favorite defensemen in the league. And just knowing that there's a whole community of people that think he's an absolute horrible defenseman, it blows my mind, because I watch Seth Jones play and he's spectacular. He's always one of the best players on the ice. And that's kind of what I hope Jake Sanderson turns out to be. So, take some of that stuff, again, with a grain of salt. Yeah, I mean, we all have to take analytics are great. Personally, I find they're useful if put in the right situations. That's all I'm going to say about it. They're useful in the right situations. Don't live and die by the sword when it comes to analytics, but also don't live and die by the sword when it comes to the eye test. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're saying have a nice balanced approach, and don't ruin the game for yourself, or you won't really like it very much. That's for sure. But, we do still have to talk about the team going into camp. Looking at this roster, we kind of know who's going to make it and who's not going to make it. But I think there's one player, actually two players, that should be considered dark horses, and I mentioned them earlier, Mark Kastelic and Parker Kelly. The reason for that is that Parker Kelly has won the hardest working Senator in the prospect camps and the development camp the last 2 years. Kastelic is very much the same way. DJ Smith and Pierre Dorion seem high on both of these players. If one of these prospects starts slipping, or one of these NHL players, slips a little bit, do not be surprised to see Kelly or Kastelic kind of take control of it. And that's what the players are going to need to do, is once one player slips, you're going to take control of the situation and prove that you belong there. I think this year, probably more than any, people are going to absolutely freak out when they see the final roster and they see kind of what our opening night roster is. And I think that because there's no preseason that we're able to see. So every bit of assessment is going to be based on, what the coaches see and what Dorian sees in camp. So we don't get, Purvey to watch 6 preseason games and then make an assessment saying, Formenton scored 5 points. Why is he off the roster? He should be on it. And, Batherson did nothing. Why did he make the team? So what we're going to see is a couple of, like you said, probably a couple of surprise players make this roster. I would lean probably towards who they just acquired, and Coburn and Paquette. Those are veteran players that I think probably have an edge when it comes to making this team and probably making it over some of the players that we might want to see graduate from the AHL, like a Josh Norris or, perhaps a Logan Brown. And I think that's going to happen. I think we're going to see the final roster and we're going to be left with a whole bunch of questions as to, why some of these players were cut from the team. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision, and we don't get to see any of it this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, and hopefully they'll at least possibly stream any kind of scrimmages they have or inter-squad games that they have near the end of the end of preseason or end of training camp, I mean. But, I think realistically looking at this roster, the forward group is pretty much set for the most part. We're going to have some of the guys who've been kind of straggling along. Defense is going to be really interesting to see who comes in and who shows. I'm kind of curious on where Coburn fits. Who does Coburn replace? He's a left-handed shot. We have Wolanin and Riley under NHL contracts for this year. Could we see, should we expect maybe another move? Possibly. But I really think that Coburn's going to slot in and over Riley. If Wolanin, he's going to – him and Goodbranson, I feel like would be a solid third pairing, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Coburn on the left side and Branstrom on the right side.
I think it's going to be game-by-game decision. I think I said this last week when we talked about it, but I really think that DJ Smith is going to utilize the taxi squad as much as possible, and I think he's going to game plan for some of those heavier Western teams. He'll probably want to play a heavier game. So he'll bring in, you might see a Riley scratched for a Coburn. You might see that kind of shift versus more of a skilled team like a Montreal, who's a smaller team. Then you might see Mike Riley come in to provide more offense. You might even see Eric Branstrom come in here and there to provide some offense. So I think all of these players, they have 5 taxi squad positions?
Yeah, because it's up to 6, but one of them has to be a goalie. So that one's most likely going to be Decord.
Yeah.
So you have basically 5 positions, and I would expect it to be 3 forwards and 2 defensemen.
And then there's always injuries in camp. So, you always have to factor in, we don't want to say that, but it's bound to happen. That's the reality of the sport when you're, guys, especially in a competitive camp like this is, guys are going to be competing for spots and they're not going to be taking it easy. And they haven't played hockey in a long time. So a lot of these guys are kind of coming in cold when it comes to actual, physical contact and playing hockey. So I won't be surprised to see a couple of injuries. And then we'll have 5 taxi squad positions. And I really think all 5 of them are going to get rolled into game situations, and we're going to see kind of an influx of players coming in, players coming out, and lineup changes probably based on the performance the night before. So, if the team performed really well, he might be kind of set to keep the same lineup, and if the team underperformed, he'll probably make some changes.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens in camp and with this roster. And we've talked about who we want to perform and what we expect from these guys in camp, and we're not going to be able to see it. Media's not going to be in there watching it. It's going to be a very silent camp. And with the moves that have happened, I don't think any player really. Well, not any player, but most players on this team aren't safe for a deal. If there's a deal on the table, with Taves and Doc being out long term, and as well as Nylander for the Blackhawks, there's a good chance that we could see one of our centers, Tierney and Nisimov, most likely being dealt at some point. If that's a route that, Chicago and Ottawa wanted to go, it's very much a possibility for us.
Yeah, I think a lot of teams are turning to Ottawa to make deals because they know kind of the ability that Dorion has right now to make a deal. He's just got a ton of leverage, so he could use some of that. Chicago, Anisimov just makes a world of sense for Chicago. He was just there. He's got chemistry with Kane already. But at the same time, he did help bring in a player like Dadonov to Ottawa. So at the same time, you kind of wonder, he's another player that you could actually slot at the top of the lineup if you wanted to, and see what he could do right at the top, playing with Dadonov and Tkachuk. I think you made that point way earlier, when we first learned that Dadonov was coming to Ottawa. So I wouldn't be surprised to see something like that if they wanted to go with more of a veteran presence up front.
Yeah, I mean, I think Anisimov is one of those guys where you could slot in. But if you're going to give him a chance, like he's going to go to Chicago. If you trade him to Chicago, he's going to Chicago to be a top 6 player for the season. And I think out of respect to Anisimov and what he's done in his career, that is a better situation for him than it would be for him being the extra forward in Ottawa. So, yeah, he brought Dadonov here. Thank you. That was a great thing. But would you rather be a Bodker and where you're in and out of the lineup, for games at a time? Or would you rather go to Chicago where you live full time now? You have chemistry, you have experience in Chicago where you can go and basically be a top 6 player again for your last year of your deal, and most likely the last year of your career, unless you want to be a depth player for however long you want to play.
It makes a ton of sense to have Anisimov return to Chicago if there's a deal that they could find, to send him there. And I don't think it would be very hard to work out a deal to send him there. It's not like you would ask a ton back from Chicago. I think it was a 1-for-1 swap, if I'm not mistaken, with Zach Smith. So it could be that Ottawa doesn't even need a player coming back, probably a 5th round draft pick, To me, I think that would get the deal done. And Ottawa has a ton of center depth. Like they just acquired Paquette, who could easily be a 4th-line center on this team. He's a great penalty killer. Doesn't provide a whole lot offensively. Obviously, they still have Colin White. They still have Chris Tierney. I'm probably missing a few.
They added Derek Stepan.
Derek Stepan. There you go. There's a player that's probably going to project near the top of the lineup. He's came out recently saying that he wants to refine his offensive game and play more of an offensive role in Ottawa. So, I wouldn't be surprised if they give him the opportunity to do that.
He kind of hinted at the idea of playing with Stützle. So I think
that'd be a good fit, honestly. Stützle played really well in the DEL with Ben Smith. A veteran center in Ben Smith who has a lot of similar qualities, I think, to Derek Stepan. Obviously, Stepan, the more quality player at the NHL level, but that would be a good fit, I think, for Stützle.
I think, and realistically, a line of Stützle, Stefan, and Batherson would probably be the best thing I could think of for those 2 players. Having a veteran, established center feeding you the puck on both sides or being able to finish it in the middle would be great for them.
I would love that. That would be a perfect 3rd line, maybe even 2nd line option. I think, you could probably make a case for that being the 2nd line some nights if they're performing well, and for that being the third line some nights. But that would be an excellent option.
Yeah, and I mean, we also have to remember, Nick Paul was drafted as a center and can still play center, even though he's basically been playing wing the last couple of years.
Yeah.
He's also an option down the middle if need be.
Yeah, they have tons of option, tons of depth down the middle. No one that really stands out as a clear-cut number 1 guy. I mean, we're hoping that Colin White kind of regains form, but I don't even know if he'll be getting the first opportunity to play with Tkachuk and Dadonov. I think that's the only guarantee for the first line. You've got Tkachuk on the left side, Dadonov on the right side. But who knows who's playing in the middle.
Yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if White is given the opportunity at first, especially since Stefan from my understanding, isn't joining the Senators camp. because he is expecting his third child on January 3rd. He's expected to stay in Arizona in Scottsdale awaiting the birth of his child. And then at that point, he would make the proper moves to come up here and join the boys up here. So with that, I mean, I think Coburn and Paquette also still need to quarantine. Not really sure about what their situation is, but they'll also need to quarantine, so they probably won't be available in camp. So you do have room to show these guys, like show the coaching staff that, hey, I deserve to be here. And it's up to them to kind of take the initiative and show them like, hey, I want this spot. I'm going to take this spot. You're not going to move me from this spot.
Which is why I think it's even more questionable if Tim Stützle is going to be on the opening night roster. Yeah, go Germany. Exactly. I just kind of wonder if he's not in camp and he's going to miss the majority of it, are they really going to take a young player and just slot him into the lineup? Right off the hop. Is that something they're going to do? It is. We should note that it is his birthday on January 15th. So it would be a really nice birthday gift if he scored a goal against our arch rivals, the Toronto Maple Leafs. But what do you think about that? Do you think they're just going to say, this kid's good enough, we're going to give him a roster spot, we're going to save one for him? Or what if someone has a really good camp? How do you tell that player, like, you did everything right, but unfortunately we have this 18-year-old kid that's waiting to play?
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You earn your spot with TJ Smith. He does not care where you're drafted. He does not care what the back of your name says. You earn your roster spot with him. I think he would come to camp. I don't see him part of the opening night roster. I really don't. And that's not unless they lose tonight, unless Germany were to lose today, he's in Ottawa by 1:00 in the morning tomorrow and quarantining. I don't see how you would expect a guy to come in a week max before your first game, and you have all these guys already practicing for a week. How you expect them to be when you have guys like Norris and whatnot, where you're telling them, you have to earn your spot. To have a guy like Stützle come in and basically be handed a spot, I don't see how that would work well with the locker room. I think that would be a very negative impact on the locker room, and it would kind of split the locker room of like, you're giving him this chance to play because of where he was picked, and that goes against everything you've been preaching for the last year and a half.
I do kind of worry about, just the depth that Pierre Dorion has acquired. If they don't move anyone out, how some of the younger guys might be feeling going into this camp, thinking that, what chance do I realistically have to make the team anyway? Obviously that's not going to be your mindset going into a camp. Your mindset is going to be, I don't care if this guy's slotted in front of me, I'm going to beat him for his position. And I think that's what they want to see. That's the attitude they want to see from the Logan Browns. That's the attitude they want to see even from Josh Norris, who I think is a little bit younger and has a little bit longer to develop if he needs it. But, someone like Alex Formenton, who a couple of months ago I seen making the team, now looking at the roster, I don't think there's any chance he makes the team.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting. Personally, I would hate to see Ottawa go against their word. And I think DJ Smith has been honest with everyone. He's been open. He's told them what he expects from them. And I think that's crucial is that, okay, we've brought in these players, but nothing is set in stone. If you come into camp and show us that you deserve those spots and deserve those minutes, you're going to get those minutes.
Yeah, and that's the right. I think that's the right approach as well. I do think the opposite. I do think Tim Stützle is going to have a spot on the roster, whether he's there or not. I just think they've got to sell this thing to the fan base, and the way to do that is through a kid that plays the way he does. And they're playing the Leafs. It's his birthday. I'd be thoroughly surprised if he wasn't in the opening night roster, but we'll see. We'll see how that situation plays out.
Hey, honestly, with this team, you never know what can happen, and I'm not going to take risk on betting on it. Yeah. It's all speculation at this point until the team announces anything.
No, and that's perfectly fair. I mean, no argument there. You sometimes you just never know.
Yeah. I mean, I'm excited. This Jersey Day thing, like the photo day, getting to see our players in our new slacks are going to be fantastic. They already posted a little GIF of Tierney taking a picture, and damn, these jerseys look good. I cannot wait to see them on the ice.
I can't wait to see them through the TV. Like, it's just going to look phenomenal through the TV. Yeah, it does. It genuinely, it feels like a rebrand. It feels like, we haven't had hockey for so long. It does not feel like the same Ottawa Senators that we're going to see this season. I think they're going to surprise a lot of people. I'm excited to see the Ottawa Senators finally take to the ice January 15th.
Oh, yeah. It's going to be a beautiful sight to see. But, guys, the World Juniors is on. We got the, I believe it's, is it Slovakia versus Finland right now?
It is. Let me check my schedule.
I cannot. I've been doing so much World Junior stuff. If you guys haven't checked out my Sens Hour Twitter, I am literally just on top of all the World Junior stuff in terms of like the potential scenarios and breakdowns of what can happen today and what can happen for the rest of the tournament. So yeah, it's Finland and Slovakia. That's going on right now as we finish up the recording of this episode. And just a last reminder, Finland needs a win of any kind, really, to stay pace with Canada. Even a loss in regulation won't hurt them if they can beat Canada, but a win here will do them greatly. Slovakia just needs a single point or needs a win to give them a shot at second with a Finland loss. Game 2, Switzerland, Germany, super simple. Germany gets 1 point, they're in. So Switzerland wins in regulation, they're in. And then the late game, Russia versus Sweden. Sweden win would take a stranglehold on first into their matchup versus USA on the 31st. A Russia regulation win would guarantee them first in Group A and give them either Switzerland or Germany in the quarterfinal matchup starting on the 2nd.
And let's go Robbie Arventi. Hopefully Robbie can kind of prove us wrong here because he's had a really quiet tournament. So hopefully he can kind of pick up his play and maybe start producing a goal or even a point would be nice.
Yeah, just see what he can do. I mean, it is what it is at the end of the case. He'll go back to Finland and hopefully continue to improve over there with the men's league. But that's all for today's episode, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. Next week we'll have more Sens hockey to talk about. We'll have a little bit of training camp news to report and more World Junior stuff to report as we'll be looking into the semifinals next episode. Quarterfinals are on Saturday with the tournament ending on the 5th. So we got a lot of hockey between now and then. And hopefully we'll have some more news to talk about. Thank you guys again for tuning in. Follow us on Sens_Hour on Instagram, on Twitter, and check us out on YouTube, Sens Hour. For myself, it's Shane_Ryan97. Derek is DLee075. And check out his stuff on SensShot and New Era Sense. He has a new article coming out later today, I believe, for SensShot. If you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Music, on Thursday, he has released that article, so definitely check it out. That's all, folks. Stay safe. Have a happy new year, and we'll catch you back in the new year.
Take care, everyone.